Welcome to another episode of SummitCast. In this show, we're going to be talking about what is the appeal of socialism. Noah, I thought I'd start with a quote which has been attributed to many people, including Winston Churchill.
All right.
And that is, anyone who isn't a socialist by the time they're 20 doesn't have a heart, and anyone who isn't a conservative by the time they're 40 doesn't have a head.
Yeah.
Sounds like the kind of thing Churchill would say, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like the kind of thing someone who's over 40 would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like that's kind of a natural progression.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. You get more conservative or more, I don't know, my stuff is my stuff in your old age.
Well, you've got stuff.
Yeah, you've got stuff. You've got stuff worth
When you're
protecting.
20, you don't have stuff.
Yeah.
So having other people sharing their stuff is
Great.
fine.
Yeah, it's great. It's like, yeah, you can borrow my 1992 Honda anytime you want. It's like, but your Ferrari, not so much.
Yeah. I mean, what it strikes me is that, kind of philosophically, the idea is the appeal of socialism is that, from an idealistic point of view, is that people want to help other people.
Right.
And then the thing about 40 is you find out that socialism doesn't really help. It's not really the way to do that.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting perspective. You're trying to help people, and I think there's a perspective that being against socialism is being against helping people.
Yeah.
There's this stigma that you're an old Scrooge that just wants everything for himself. But it's trying to find the best way to help people, the most effective way to help them. Yeah.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it is, from a spiritual perspective. In the Bible, Jesus says we need to, help the poor and take care of the sick and the hungry and so on. And so it's a spiritual prerogative or imperative to do that.
Yeah. In many religions, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and, in the East too. I mean, you're supposed to give money to beggars. It's just a thing you need to do.
Right.
And in one sense, it's a way of balancing karma. You have you might have been in the other position in the last life, it's a way of balancing karma with that person. And the way you balance karma is by giving, right? But if the government does it, the government takes it from you.
Right.
You're not giving, so you don't make the good karma.
There's no free will choice to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I think of the difference between giving to someone. Say if you see someone who's in need and you give them something that will help them.
Okay.
So how do you feel when you do that?
You feel great. Yeah.
You feel great, yeah. And you do it out of love, right?
Right.
And how does the person who receives it feel?
Well, generally, I would say they feel grateful. I mean, I know in the past that's the way I felt.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's an interchange of love and gratitude between
Right.
people, right? And it's really the love that I think balances the karma in a sense.
Right. This connection, this flow between two people.
Yeah. So how do you feel when you pay your taxes?
Yeah. Not my favorite day of the week.
Yeah, there's no love there, you
Right.
know. You're not giving from your heart. So and the person who's receiving, they often don't feel gratitude. They feel like, it's an entitlement. I mean, that's what it's called. It's an entitlement program.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like you owe the world owes me this. And so there's no instead of love and gratitude, you've got resentment and resentment in a sense,
An entitlement. Yeah.
an entitlement.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not a way of balancing karma to help people that way. It takes away the spiritual purpose of what it should be.
Much more mechanical.
Yeah. And and people try to find ways of getting out of paying taxes, and
Of course.
especially the rich people. The
Yeah.
rich people are very good at that. So.
Oh yeah.
And along with that, people like people who have a lot of money these days, instead of giving to help other people, it's almost they spend it instead in lobbying the government to get the government to introduce socialist programs. So, in the last election, Mark Zuckerberg spent $400 million to get
Is that right?
Democrats
$400
elected.
million.
Of his own money, yeah.
Wow.
To get the Democrats elected, to get Biden elected.
That's an impressive amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, if he'd actually spent that on helping people, it could have made a big difference.
Well, I guess from his perspective, it would be that he will be helping people through democratic policy. But
yeah, but it's an indirect thing. You're not actually helping people.
Right,
You're just trying to get the government to take money from other people to help people.
Didn't who is the was it Carnegie? One of the John D. Rockefeller. One of them who had always had dimes in his pocket, and wherever he would go, he would just hand out dimes. And of course, 100 years ago, a dime was actually worth something.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a similar philosophy. I would think, if $400 million towards electing someone. That's $1 a person, a little over $1 a person for every
person
citizen.
in America.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you gave it to the people who really needed it, and there's a lot of people who really need it at the moment, out of work with COVID and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, it definitely feels, whenever I've been able to help people, having that direct interaction, and you don't feel better than them. You feel like you are happy to give them money because you're having this exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been happy to give generously because of that, versus whenever the government bill comes around every year, it's okay. Is there anything I can do to make this bill smaller?
Yeah. Yeah, you're not giving from the heart, and so
Right.
there's not a spiritual component to it, and it's kind of like it's almost the opposite of that from a spiritual perspective.
Well, I guess that's kind of what I've seen from nonprofits or from these organizations that are trying to make a difference. Giving water to kids, communities in Africa or India or wherever. I feel like they key into that idea of giving directly.
Yeah. It's not that all your charity needs to be, person to person. I mean, a charity like that, which collects money from people, and they're doing a very, valuable service as an intermediary, because you can't go over to Mali and give people some water, but they can do it. But then when you give to those charities, you feel good. You do it because you want to. You do it from free will. You do it because you love and you care, and so on. So it still has the same spiritual component.
So what about areas that aren't so glamorous, but still maybe need support from people, either from a nonprofit, if socialism is not the best way to do that, but you still want to help people, but building wells in Africa is glamorous, but there's other projects that aren't so glamorous. Like, I don't know, helping rural people who have drug addiction issues or whatever. How do we solve that if not through government intervention?
Well, I think if you educate people on the need, you can raise money for things like that. I was in a non-profit in Bozeman, and we were providing mediation services.
Okay.
For low-income people, going through divorces, and we could raise money for that. Some of it came from private individuals, some of it came from foundations. You would write a grant, and the foundation would give you the money.
Okay. So you had the calling to this area of need for mediating for low-income individuals, and so it almost sounds like you have to we have to promote this idea of personal responsibility, that not just for your own life, but sometimes you need to go out and start a charitable organization to help a specific group of people.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the people who supported it, they were people who were mediators, and so they had the skills, and a lot of the people who supported it would actually volunteer in the programs, and you got to meet the people you were helping, which was really, really good. Just doing the volunteer mediation, and you see what a difference it makes in their lives.
Yeah. Having that heart flame, that one-to-one interaction with someone.
I wouldn't say there's no place for the government in being involved in kind of charity. I mean, in the same way that a private charity can be the intermediary then a government could serve that role too. But I think the closer to the local level of government that it happens, the better,
Right.
in a sense, because if it's you pay local taxes to your community, and then the money from there goes to help people in that community.
Right.
I mean, the people who are getting it are more likely to connect the fact that this came from somebody.
Right.
This came
Yeah.
from people in the community, and they're grateful for it.
Right. I have a business in our local community, and I pay a tax directly to that. It's not a state tax or anything. It's a local community tax, and I feel much happier every month when I need to send that check in versus when the state or the federal income tax is due. Just like you said, it's that separation that I get this quarterly or yearly statement of where were these funds used, what were the projects. If you in the community want to apply for a grant from this fund, you can, and so it feels much more close, and I feel like I have a say in it. Like I could ask them, if the funds could be used in a specific area of need.
Yeah.
Within the community.
Yeah, you know where the money is going. You feel good about it going there, and the people who receive the money know that it's coming from other people in their and businesses in their community.
They know that all of these specific businesses in their community are the ones that are funding these activities, which is cool. It's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, and the further away it gets, I mean, when it's the federal government involved, then people just have this sense that, the government's got unlimited money. And
well, I think some people think the government has unlimited money, the way they've been spending it.
The way they're spending it, they just keep printing more. Yeah, it's not going to end well. It's fun while the party lasts, but
Yeah, as a relatively young person, I just wonder what this is going to do to the future of our economy. Spending tens of trillions at this point.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be surprising to see it go the way of every other paper currency in history. Every paper currency in history that wasn't backed by something, pretty much ended up being worth nothing.
Right.
Well,
and every republic has an end, right? Isn't it the theory that no republic lasts forever?
I haven't heard that one.
Oh, really? Oh, I can't remember who said that. Yeah. It's not a positive outlook for America.
Yeah.
In our global dominance, it's every republic comes to an end. Every empire, has
I guess Toynbee said that. He said you get to a point where there's increasing challenges, and the only way to survive and get past that is like a spiritual transcendence. I think he called it etherealization, didn't he?
I don't know.
But it has to be. He talked about all these people come along who are saviors. There's the savior with a sword, or there's the savior with a time machine, and in one sense, Trump was selling himself as the savior with the time machine. Make America great again. It's looking to the past. If we can just go back to the way things were, then everything will be wonderful.
Right. I had a problem with that just from the again part.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, looking towards the past, I always felt like, let's just end it, make America great, or I like this, and not just America. I mean, I feel like America is a stand-in for maybe what you would call Western ideals, or this idea of democracy, and that's kind of the way I see it, is this personal freedom, this ability to choose your own destiny.
Yeah.
That let's make that happen. Let's expand on that.
Yeah. And I think Toynbee's concept is the only way to get through the challenge, and kind of what we're seeing in the world today is a spiritualization of consciousness. He said it's only the embodied Christ that is the only savior that will really work. And I think it has to be kind of everybody rising to that level of consciousness, or at least a large enough number that it's kind of the leaven that shifts the whole the direction of society.
Well, I've heard that as a kind of an argument against socialism, was this idea of homogeneity in the populace. So if you have most people are on board with this idea of, okay, yeah, let's give our taxes and let's pay in towards the common good, and then you have a few bad actors who are specifically using the government for, and not even to say that they're poor people who are just living on the dole, but they're using their government connection to take more from the system than they're receiving, or than they're giving. That if you don't have that kind of Christ consciousness within the group, it can be difficult to maintain in the long term.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what happened with most of the communes in the 60s. I mean, people went in very idealistic and, put all their money together and everyone shared everything in common. And then it all fell apart within a few years.
Right.
Because, a few people would do all the work and other people would just be there and, sending out good vibes, and they thought that was enough, and the people, and then it just fell apart. And the ones that survived actually transitioned from that to a private property model, and then it was sustainable.
Okay, a private property in the sense that the individuals in the
community own their own property, own their own car. If it's the community car, then everybody's responsible for looking after it, which means that nobody's responsible for looking after it. But if it's
sounds familiar.
Yeah. Whereas if it's my car, I'm going to look after it. You know?
Yeah.
And you can, if you want to borrow it, please ask me. But you make sure. So.
And if you break it, you buy it.
Yeah. So that's kind of part of. One concept of socialism is that actually. It can work if people have the Christ consciousness, in a sense. If they have the Holy Spirit, if they have that level of attainment and so you read in the Bible after the day of Pentecost, all the disciples of Jesus, they had all their funds in common, and it worked because they had the Holy Spirit, I think.
All right.
So
how long did it work for?
Well, I don't know. It still works for some Catholic orders, the Franciscans. They don't own private property, and that has been durable. Mm-hmm. They have a strong spiritual hierarchy and a very strong spiritual practice.
Okay. Do they receive outside kind of donations or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the way the Franciscans started. They just used to beg for food. That was the only thing they used to do.
Right.
And the men would go out going door to door begging, and the women had a hard time because they couldn't go out. So they just depended on people bringing them stuff.
Why couldn't they go out?
Well, it wasn't allowed. That was part of their rule. They were women. You couldn't have single women going out.
Fair enough.
In that time, it wasn't safe.
Yeah. I don't think much has changed there in some parts of the world.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the world was like that then. So they used to fast a lot because nobody brought them food.
That's tough. Be like, really? Do I really believe in this stuff? Because I haven't eaten in 5 days.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a real test of faith. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a community, and you're wondering why the dudes aren't bringing. If the male monks get a little bit of extra bread, maybe they drop by the nuns and share the wealth.
Yeah.
Wow. So I guess that's one case and that's still going on today. They still.
Yeah, I don't know if they're so strict on the vow of poverty these days, but in general, Catholic orders, they have very limited private property, and if you work outside the community, then your pay all goes to the community.
Wow. Okay.
So I think it can work. And one way of looking at it is if people have developed a certain level of the Christ consciousness and awareness of like their self-worth and what it means to look after stuff and take responsibility, which you develop through the free enterprise system, then you can decide at a certain point that everything you've attained, for yourself and your family and everything, you kind of have a bigger goal, a bigger vision, and you'll do that on behalf of a larger circle than just your family, whatever your community is, and maybe a spiritual community. Mm-hmm. And so then it can work because everyone takes responsibility for everything. It's like if it's everyone's responsibility to look after the car, people will do it because they all take personal responsibility for it. They'll make sure it happens.
Right.
But it's a certain level of kind of maturity on the spiritual path, I think, for that to work.
Yeah, that whole idea of personal responsibility, and how do you promote personal responsibility?
Well, I think the free enterprise system is what helps people to do that. It's actually a means for people to develop that sense of self-worth and creativity and being able to actually achieve something in the physical, and actually spiritual mastery, in a sense, which is it's demonstrated in the physical, but the physical works because you've got it together internally.
Okay.
And then, at a certain point, you decide, I've done everything I need to do, to feel like I've accomplished what I need to do in this life, and now I can be part of a community and work for the good of a larger circle. And that's kind of like the stage of spiritual development. But if you skip the step in the middle and just force everyone to put everything in common, it really falls apart pretty fast.
Right. So the communes should have much more stringent entrance exam before allowing the hippies to come in.
Yep.
Have you attained your perfect?
Have you been successful in the world?
Yes.
Do you have something to offer to the community rather than just your good vibes?
Right. Well, and I think, like you were saying earlier about this idea of when you're young, you think socialism's great, is you don't really understand what it takes to succeed when you're young. A lot of people do. Some people, they're 18 and they're already millionaires or something. But for most people, I think you're just starting to understand what it means to have your own identity separate from your parents. And so you don't have this sense of how to make it, how, what it takes to actually make it in life. And so it's easy to say, I can, give everything away, or I can do this, or I can that, because you don't really understand what it takes. Yeah.
And you don't have much. You can give everything away because you don't have anything.
Yeah, of course.
You have very little.
I'll give away my baseball card collection.
Yeah.
You probably have a car by then, usually. I mean, if you're 18 or so, 20.
A cheap car.
The cheap car, but a car nonetheless. Yeah. But what else are you going to do with it? Yeah. It's kind of a difficult quandary. How do you? Because when I was younger, I would say I was be significantly more interested in socialism or in helping the poor from this big hand of government perspective. Mm-hmm. And as that's moved on, probably I think with every tax season, every time April 15th comes around, I got a little bit more like this. Maybe this isn't the best way. How can I help? And getting involved with the food bank. Mm-hmm. I think these areas are helping out with. There's an organization that helps people in Africa become farmers, and so they help them raise cattle, things like that. Because what I liked about that, it was more than just putting a well in their backyard. It was this idea that they were giving them a cow or two cows, I guess, mm-hmm. And then showing them, okay, this is what you need to become a cattle farmer or a chicken farmer or a goat farmer in rural Africa. And they gain that personal responsibility. They gain that ability to help themselves. Yeah. Through charity, through help, which was absolutely necessary. To say that it's not necessary is absurd. Some people need help. They need a lot of help. And how can we help them through education? I love that. There's a Will Smith movie where he becomes a stockbroker.
That's fantastic.
It's absolutely fantastic because he realizes that he's probably not going to get that help from anyone else. And there's a few people through the movie that really give him that break. And it shows that sometimes, you just need that leg up. But it was his determination. Yeah. The key to success was his determination that he was going to provide for his son and all of that.
It's the art of happiness, isn't it?
Yeah. And they spell it. I think they spell it with an I. With a Y.
With a Y. Yes. Yeah. That was a really great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what you're saying, I think, is really true. Part of the problem with socialism a lot of the time is it's just giving somebody money, or giving someone food, and it doesn't help them. it actually makes them dependent. Whereas what you're talking about with this, the charity in Africa, they're actually helping people to become independent,
right,
and to have that, be able to own their own, make their own living, and
right,
and not be dependent on other people, and that's really helping them to fulfill their mission in life, fulfill their spiritual purpose for being.
Which is what they want. I think the vast majority of people want that. They want that self-determination. They don't want to give their power away to bureaucrats in Washington or something.
Yeah,
they want that to be able to make their life better on their own terms.
Yeah. Well, in the long term, I think for a certain period of time, I mean, maybe when you're younger, the idea of government paying me money for not doing anything, and I can hang out and play guitar and go to the beach and so on could be appealing for a while, but not for long. I don't think. You know, it wouldn't. After a while, you'd realize there's got to be more to life than this, and then
hopefully.
But the problem is, if you got used to that life and not having to earn a living out of necessity, you may not know even how to make that step.
I think I had a adjunct professor in university that he used to work for a government institute, some type of government policy where they were giving out money. I'm trying to remember which, like unemployment kind of a situation. And this woman came into him and into his office and was saying, I really want to have a job. I really want to work. But if I get a job, they'll stop paying me this amount of money from the government, and that job doesn't pay enough to. I think she had 1 or 2 kids at the time. Isn't enough income for our family, and she was saying, well, what am I supposed to do? So I can either stay on the government dole, or I can be even more poor while having a job.
A really tough situation.
Yeah, really tough situations to be in, and how can we help that? How can we move beyond that? Yeah, the welfare state.
Yeah, not easy solutions, and part of the problem is the whole tax structure and the whole the way the economy is. It's so kind of unreal at the moment. Yeah, it's so distorted. Right. That there's so many layers of stuff that needs to be corrected. It becomes almost like the Gordian knot.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it's and there's so many different aspects of like now this the latest idea of it's been around for quite a while. This raising the minimum wage to $15, and how does that improve or not improve people's lives? It seems like every time government tries their big hammer to hit a small nail, it ends poorly.
Unintended consequences. Yeah, and the unintended consequence there is that, the people it hurts most are the teenagers and the young people wanting to get their first job, and those jobs go away. I mean they're not worth. They may not be worth $10, more $15 an hour because they don't know anything. They don't have any experience, and the amount of extra income the business could generate by having them, that wouldn't cover the 15 plus. But it's not just the 15; it's also the Social Security taxes and unemployment taxes and everything else. So it really it's a barrier to the young people coming into the workforce. At an entry level job and then working. They can work their way up and to earn more later, but it really hurts them at the beginning.
And how much should their labor be worth? Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer.
Well, it's. I mean, from an economic point of view, the labor is worth what the income it can generate for the business. Right. On a one-to-one basis, you can mow someone's yard, and what's it worth to them, for you to do it.
So I just wonder if you have businesses that are making billions of dollars in profit, like these large corporations. Is there kind of a mental block towards giving a higher wage to the low-end employees when they theoretically could afford it? I think, I mean, because there's record profits in lots of industries, and yet they aren't paying more.
Yeah, and that's a problem in a sense too. And I mean, Henry Ford very famously like doubled the wages of his people who worked in his factories, and it worked out really well for him. You know? I mean, the people were really happy working there. They were making very good money, and they could afford to buy cars, and so he sold more cars and so on. You know.
Yeah, but when you have a company who can pay more, if you now have the government come in and create a policy that says you have to pay them more, I just worry that, which I think we're going to see, that the companies will say, well, maybe I'll just hire fewer employees. I'll have, like McDonald's, have more kiosks. I know, I was at the store the other day, and they now have an ordering kiosk in Costco for ordering food, so you don't even have to go up to the person anymore, and then your food pops out. So I just wonder if instead of this noble goal of telling the big corporations that they have to spend more of their earnings towards these employees, the companies aren't going to do that. Why would they do that? There's no incentive to do that.
Yeah, and that's what happened. I mean, when they did it in, I think it was Seattle, they raised the minimum wage to 15, and a lot of people lost their jobs.
Right.
I mean, a significant number of people lost their jobs or were working less hours, and companies like McDonald's can afford to, automate and get robots to cook burgers
and why shouldn't they? At some level, perhaps they should.
Yeah. And the thing is that in one sense that companies like McDonald's can invest in the technology to put the robots in, and whereas the little local In-N-Out Burger in Livingston, Mark's In-N-Out Burger, established in 1954. He can't afford to do that. He's got to hire real people.
Yeah, he's got those cheap high school kids.
Yeah, you can pay them lower wages. It's a great summer job. I mean, it's everything to like about it, really.
Yeah, I think, and I think the argument against keeping the wage at the current level is that it's below a livable wage, and so you're kind of indoctrinating poverty, permanent poverty to these people. I just have to wonder if it comes back to that personal responsibility. Where's the interchange between being stuck between a rock and a hard place with this job versus this? How do you lift yourself out of that?
Yeah. Well, I think I've kind of read studies that the argument for raising the wages, you can't support a family on what the minimum wage is now.
Right.
But they did studies, and there was some very, very small percentage of people who were on the minimum wage were actually supporting a family. I mean, a lot of the people who are on the minimum wage were the teenagers and the young people in their first job, who weren't in the position of supporting a family. They were living with their parents or whatever, So it's kind of it's not a really great argument for it in that sense. I mean, because the unintended consequences are worse in a sense, and what you really want to do is the people who are having to support a family, you want them to be able to graduate through experience and training and to be able to work in a job which pays more. So the solution isn't, to solve for that 5% of the people, you hurt the 95% of the others, or you hurt more people who actually can't get jobs because there aren't any jobs available at wages which, would be economical for them.
Yeah, exactly.
For someone to hire them.
But what do you do? Just want to help the people.
Yeah.
I know, and in Montana, in Bozeman specifically, they have the house prices have just gone so astronomical that, and the wages haven't kept up.
Yeah.
You hear of people making $15 or $20 an hour, and the median house price being $400,000. It's like, okay,
no way.
That's going to be impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the house price is kind of another thing. That's another area where the government has created the problem.
Okay.
Through all the regulations about houses and so it has to be so many square foot and all the taxes they pay to build a house and to build a new house, and the government is putting a lot of barriers in the way of people building more housing, which
Right.
would, if there was more housing available, then the prices wouldn't be so high.
Increased supply would
Yeah.
lower. Yeah. Yeah, and we have lots of space in Montana, so it doesn't make sense that they shouldn't be able to
Yeah.
increase the supply.
Yeah, and it's a kind of it's a green thing not to, to not allow the housing to sprawl, but then,
Right.
it keeps the house prices high.
Right. And I think we have Skyline Limits, right? Like you can't build a 20-story building in Bozeman, Montana. So I don't know. I don't know
Probably
if
there's
that's true.
probably,
I'm pretty sure there are limitations there. So
yeah, and there's things like minimum square feet you have to have for an apartment and so on. And
Oh, really?
I think there is. I don't know the details, but those are the kind of things they do. If you build an apartment, it has to be more than a certain size. And
Right.
things like that. So it has to be a certain amount of money.
Right.
And I remember I was reading a article in the Bozeman Chronicle where they talked about the crisis of the no affordable housing available in the community, and people were talking about all these solutions, and it was all, what's the government going to do to build inexpensive housing?
Right.
Whereas, so you create a problem and then solve it. But if you just got the government out of the way, then the market could take care of it. Because there's a lot of people who would like to have a $150,000 house in Bozeman. If you got rid of the regulations, people could start building them.
Yeah, for sure. I know in Oklahoma, where I'm from, when I left Oklahoma for Montana, house prices, you could get a nice house in a decent neighborhood for $150,000.
Yeah.
A 3-bedroom house for $150,000. That was only 2010, 2012, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And already here the prices had gone quite a bit higher than that.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, but I kind of wondered about this difference, different definitions of socialism, like the idea of the means of production. I mean, how does that? Because you have the idea of like Venezuelan socialism, where they actually run the companies producing the oil being sold to the greater market, versus kind of American socialism of having
the
like
Denmark-Sweden model.
Right. Yeah. I mean, of like having social security, and of having taxes that pay for fire trucks and whatnot. So I wonder, are we heading down more of a path towards that more Venezuelan style of is it even still called socialism? What do you call the difference?
Well, it's kind of, you're getting into definitions of what socialism is, and there's the kind of the Marxist definition, which is the collective ownership of the means of production.
Right.
And then there's the kind of Sweden-Denmark model, which we think of as socialism or democratic socialism, but if you talk to people there, they say we don't have a socialist economy. We have an economy. We have a free market economy, and we have high taxes to support social programs.
A large safety net or whatever. I think I've heard that term.
Yeah.
The social safety net.
Yeah, and it's two different things. And, socialism, the Marxists these days, who believe in the collective ownership and so on, and that any profit is stealing from the workers and that kind of philosophy.
Right.
They're pushing the agenda by claiming what they're wanting is Sweden and the Sweden and Denmark model.
Right.
They're saying, socialism is wonderful. Look at Sweden and Denmark. It can work. But then the problem is what the policies they're pushing are kind of looking a bit more like Venezuela than Sweden.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting, because I wonder about that with like having Social Security and having my sister was on disability and receiving payments from that. I just wonder, maybe that's a good thing. It seems like it's a positive in people's lives to have that safety net, while still maintaining the separation of the means of production, that the government stays out of free enterprise as much as possible to promote business, which it's hard to argue that that's a bad thing, that increasing the number of businesses in an area or a country, increasing the production of those businesses is a good thing. It increases the number of jobs. It increases the demand for labor, so that increases the price of that labor. So, but then also,
it's not a good thing if you're a Marxist, though.
Right. Well, there's those guys. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And they're training more of them at universities, you know?
But I wonder, I guess those two seem like they're in opposition, but do they have to be in opposition?
Well, I think part of the problem you've got is that the society is so used to the government stepping in to pick up those things that if you just got rid of it, then people wouldn't step in to fill the gap, you know.
Right.
I mean, you're dependent on this system now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to have a transition to a more local level charity or a private charity, it's got to be a gradual change, you know.
Mm.
And I don't know how you would do that. I mean, I think maybe they actually did it somewhat in America with welfare reform in the 90s, didn't they?
I don't know.
I haven't really studied it, but I think they had stricter requirements to get government benefits.
Okay.
And you know, because people were getting dependent on the government, and the whole system was kind of really falling apart, and it wasn't helping people; it was making people dependent. And they had, you know, programs like where you had to work, you know, or you had to apply for jobs or whatever, you know, or do community service if you're going to get the money and so on. So they had things like that, which I think was successful, you know, and things were somewhat turned around. But then we're kind of heading in the wrong direction again now, I think. And COVID has really tremendously accelerated that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't work.
Yeah.
It's you're forbidden from working.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's the ideal setup to pursue the Marxist agenda. Don't let people work. Give them money from the government. Get them dependent on that, and then they get used to that. And then, you know, the problem with that is that, you know, you give everyone money. I mean, you give everyone in society money, and they all stay home. But who gets the food?
Yeah.
Who produces the food, you know?
Yeah. Who's picking up the trash every Tuesday? You know?
Everyone's happy staying home and getting paid, and, you know, they've got money but nothing to spend it on.
Right. Because there's no more groceries in the shelves. There's no more anything.
Yeah, because nobody's working. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting dilemma to be in. I feel like sorry about that. I feel like we're almost at an impasse with, I don't know, with where we're at in the restrictions, in the not having restrictions. Like
with COVID.
Yeah. I guess I feel insulated from it in Montana. Sorry about that. Oh, come on now. There we go. That's better.
So you feel insulated from it in Montana?
Yeah, I feel very insulated from it in Montana, which is interesting. We have a business. We're open. There's hardly any restrictions on our business, but at the same time, I feel like you see other people in other parts of the country that are completely isolated, completely
shut down.
Completely shut down.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I was just reading a study showing that the places that shut down weren't doing any better than the places that didn't.
Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of social experiment, because you're considered the evil person if you say you want to keep your business open because you just want to kill people, and it's like, well, no, I want to keep people alive, but I also want to pay the bills. Yeah, these two can work together.
Yeah, and you know, people keep talking about, you know, following the science, but then, you know, you look at the graph of California versus Florida. You know, very similar, you know, demographics and similar in many ways, and the graphs are just exactly the same, more or less, except California had lockdowns and Florida didn't.
Right.
So, you know, there's very little science to show that lockdowns actually work.
Yeah, which except they worked really well in promoting socialist kind of control agenda. This idea that you're controlling from the top down what you can do, which business you can operate, which businesses are essential. That to me was really kind of terrifying. This idea of somebody else, because it's about giving away your power. When we talked about that, you know, when the government gives you money, when someone gives you something, they can take power over you if they stop giving it to you. Yeah. If you become, you know, dependent on that constant stream of cash from the government, and the government says, well, we've decided that you aren't worth keeping around. Goodbye. You know, and that's the end of it. And what do you do? What do you do then? So if we allow our governments, which I think some people kind of forget that idea. If we allow our governments to control our lives more heavily, then we have nobody to blame but ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what you see happening in America, really. And there's people who are fighting against it,
right,
which is good. And then they're kind of waking up to the idea that the government isn't always a benign force.
Right. That it's a necessary force, but it needs to be controlled. It needs to
checks and balances.
Right, checks and balances.
Yeah.
That's why I'm constantly amazed by how beautiful the American form of government has been, how resistant it is to attempts to attack the checks and balances.
Yeah.
Or that people are always, commenting about how the checks and balances won't save our nation, won't keep us safe from this or from that. And I've seen too many examples of where that's not the case, where and things just keep moving,
against all odds.
Right. Well, against all odds, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But this idea of juxtaposition of different aspects of the government and all of that, I think it's a beautiful design. So hopefully it can withstand the socialist agenda.
Hopefully. Yeah. The thing that really worries me most is the kind of indoctrination in the schools and universities.
Right.
So there's generations of people growing up that unless they watch some of the YouTube channels by conservative people and exposed to some different ideas, they don't even exposed to those ideas about the free enterprise system and how it works and the idea of freedom.
Right. Well, that professor that I just spoke about was absolutely a raging leftist. He was promoting the idea of how taxes were a good thing, and he loved paying his taxes because he loved supporting this government and helping this poor woman with 2 kids, yada yada yada. So I mean, it existed even then when I was in school. So it's definitely there.
Yeah.
Of course, the most beautiful scene was when one of the girls in the class, who was I think 18, or she had just received her first paycheck in at that day, and she was like, "I just got my paycheck, and I'm seeing all these taxes that they're taking out. I'm poor, and I want to know where my taxes are going. Where's this money that they're stealing from me?" And it was great. It was all the I was like 23, I think, at the time, and so I had received a few paychecks, so I was used to this sad moment when you see the amount.
I earned all this money, and a third of it's gone already. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was so funny. The more adults in the room were definitely laughing, like, "Yep, get used to it." But yeah. That's government control for you.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder the difference between the means of production versus the kind of redistribution of wealth. Do you see one being promoted more than the other? I know democratic socialism is kind of a popular term these days, but I don't know.
Well, a lot of the people who are claiming to promote democratic socialism are actually Marxist. I mean, there's a organization called Democratic Socialists of America.
Nice.
And it's meant to sound like it's Sweden or something. But if you actually look at what they're saying, they're saying we have to have a violent overthrow of the system and totally remake the system in Marxist lines. Right. But they realise that the communist has a branding problem with that term.
Yeah, I think it's how many millions of deaths are associated.
So they're rebranding themselves as socialists.
Right. Yeah,
it's got a much more friendly image. So I think there's a lot of people who are pushing and in one sense it's not the government taking over the means of production, but the government kind of doing it through regulation and more regulation of what you have to do, not just minimum wage, but all the different things about what you have to do to run your business and increasing the taxes and giving money to, businesses that they want to succeed when they're not commercially viable, which ends up taking all the money from the businesses that are. And
the government do have the lobbyists who can go and speak to the representatives and give them through their super PACs and their other giving.
So there's so much corruption in the system. You know, we're really so far away from a free enterprise system
Right.
that it should be. And you know, and part of the problem is, you know, young people, idealistic people, you know, they see the system that we have, it's so corrupt, and they see capitalism and they think this is just terrible. There must be a better alternative.
Right.
And the only alternative that's presented is the kind of the Marxist, you know, socialist alternative.
Right. Take from those evil billionaires and give it to us poor people.
Yeah. But, you know, the real alternative, which very few people are talking about, some people are talking about, but very few, is a real free enterprise system.
Mm. Yeah, I watched a documentary recently. Or I don't know if it's a documentary, but they were actually saying that on certain economic freedom criteria, China was more free market than America was.
Yeah.
And I mean, I took slight offense to it just from
I've seen people making that analysis.
Right. It's that. I mean, not so much about the China is good because their free market is. Maybe they're also authoritarian and not a great model, but it was kind of a wake up call. Like this dystopian, terrible authoritarian regime is applying our principles better than we are.
Yeah. I mean, one reason they're doing well economically is because there's more economic freedom on a kind of a micro level.
Right.
You know, there's less regulation of businesses and what you have to do. And there's also, I mean, so many regulations here about all sorts of things, you know, like the width of the aisles in the supermarket has to be wide enough for a wheelchair and you know, things like that, you know, and all the paperwork you have to do to show that you're not discriminating and so many regulations like that which don't, you know, which are just, you know...
don't directly increase the bottom line, basically.
Yeah, they don't benefit anybody. They don't increase the bottom line. They don't produce any benefit for anybody. But they're a tremendous cost of doing business, and you know that's in some ways even bigger than the tax burden that businesses face. Is all
the compliance.
Compliance, regulatory compliance.
Yeah.
And so you know China has less of that, and of course the downside of that is you know. Like food safety regulations are pretty much non-existent, and you know.
Yeah. Wasn't there was an issue with leaded paint being used in children's toys? I think 10 years ago or something. So
there's just all.
Yeah.
Sorts
I mean,
of
there's
things.
constantly things you hear that.
I mean the what was it? The milk with the had the chemical in it to make it look like it had more milk in it. The nitrogen-containing chemical. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, I mean, there's been some really, really awful, really bad things.
So is that saying that you know some level of regulation is good?
Yeah, I think those kind of regulations are good.
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, you don't have any way of testing that milk to see if it's contaminated.
Right.
As an individual buyer,
Right.
you know.
Because we have the FDA, we have a general assumption that any of the food that we buy off the shelf has been vetted by some organization as being safe.
Yeah, I think that there's a real place for the government to get involved in that. I mean, in an ideal society, you wouldn't need to because people who are running businesses would be honest and would want to, you know, wouldn't want to do things that would hurt other people, you know, hurt their customers. Or
we know that's not true.
But it's not true, unfortunately, and so you got to have to deal with the evil, you know, in a sense, you know, the bad motives. You got to have some sort of regulation.
Morally corrupt.
Yeah,
there's just as many rich morally corrupt people as there are poor morally corrupt people.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So there is a place for government, and then you know the thing is to figure out what's the appropriate place, and you know what's the level where it gets counterproductive and really hurts the good things about the free enterprise system. Yeah. And I don't think we're at the balance here in America at this point.
Yeah, but how do we even find that balance? How do we even get back to it?
Yeah, well, that's...
Yeah.
I think it starts with education.
Yeah.
You know, there's this... I've heard there's this Chinese saying which says, if you're planning for a year, plant rice. If you're planning for 10 years, plant fruit trees. If you're planning for 100 years, educate children.
Yeah, there you go.
So I think that's where it needs to start. We need to educate our children in the principles of freedom, the free enterprise system, and that's really a revolution in education at the moment.
Right, and promoting that personal responsibility. I think that kind of follows through with even through education with charter schools, or this idea of you have choice in how to be educated, and finding the best school. We were looking at that when I was a kid. We looked at, and the charter school I wanted to go to is a math and science charter school, but it was about 40 minutes away from where we lived, so we decided not to, and I just stayed in our standard public school. But that option being available is so great that we can really, because I didn't hear a thing about starting my own business in my years in school. We hardly even learned how to balance a checkbook, how to any of that stuff. It's how to be a good worker, basically. It's how to be a good cog in the machine.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
How to be a good climate activist these days.
Well, maybe not that. I'm sticking with nuclear till the end. Nobody can talk to me about anything if they're not willing to talk about nuclear. So.
Well, that's another show.
There you go.
So we probably should wrap it up there.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell so you'll find out about new shows. And we'll see you next time on SummitCast.